Human hired an alien widow as a cook, but her baby's eyes awakened something he had buried. Captain James Holt stood at the viewport of Outpost Epsilon 9, his reflection a ghostly overlay against the vast emptiness of space. The reinforced glass showed a man hardened by tragedy, broad-shouldered and imposing in his battle-scarred armor, short blonde hair cropped militarily tight, and eyes that had forgotten how to convey anything but grim determination. 3 years since the Centauri incident. 3 years since he'd watched the Krellian warships tear through the hull of the UES Dauntless like it was made of paper. 3 years since he'd heard the screams of his crew, his family fade into the unforgiving vacuum of space. Captain Holt? The station administrator's voice pulled him from the abyss of his memories. I've found someone who might suit your unique requirements. James turned, his movements deliberate and controlled. I asked for a cook, Administrator Moran, not a charity case. Moran, a portly man with perpetually sweaty palms, gestured toward the door. She's qualified, sir. Worked as head chef on the Orion luxury liners before the war. References check out. James's jaw tightened. She? The door slid open with a pneumatic hiss, revealing a slender figure that made James's breath catch despite himself. The woman who entered moved with a natural grace that seemed to defy the station's artificial gravity. Her skin was a luminous azure that caught the harsh fluorescent lighting and softened it somehow. Long silver hair was pulled back in an elegant knot at the nape of her neck, revealing delicately pointed ears and high cheekbones. Her simple cream-colored dress was modest but couldn't hide her lithe form. But it was her eyes that struck him, large, expressive, and a deep indigo that reminded him of Earth's twilight sky just before the stars appeared. Captain Holt, Moran said, this is Illyria Novari. She's Illurian. James had encountered Illurians before, a peaceful species known for their artistic talents and culinary skills. What he hadn't expected was a small bundle secured to Illyria's chest in a woven carrier. You didn't mention a child, James said flatly. Illyria stepped forward, her chin lifting slightly. My daughter Lilu. She's 7 months old, Captain, if that's a problem. It is, James cut her off. I need a cook, not a nursery. Something flashed in those indigo eyes. Not anger, but a quiet determination that seemed strangely familiar. My daughter goes where I go. I can assure you she won't interfere with my duties. The infant stirred, tiny blue fists emerging from the carrier as she yawned. When her eyes opened, James felt an unexpected jolt. They were enormous in her small face, the same deep indigo as her mother's, but with flecks of silver that caught the light like distant stars. Those eyes locked onto his with an intensity that seemed impossible for an infant. There was no fear there, no judgment, just pure, innocent curiosity. I'm an excellent chef, Captain, Illyria continued, seemingly unaware of the silent exchange between her daughter and the hardened soldier. I specialize in adapting recipes to suit different physiologies. I understand humans have particular nutritional needs that... You're hired, James said abruptly, surprising even himself. Moran blinked rapidly. She is? James couldn't explain the sudden decision. Perhaps it was the practical reality that no one else had applied for the position on this remote outpost. Perhaps it was the professional confidence in Illyria's voice. Or perhaps it was something about those infant eyes that had momentarily bypassed his defenses. My shuttle leaves in 30 minutes, James said gruffly. Be on it with whatever you need. Illyria nodded, a small smile touching her lips. Thank you, Captain. You won't regret this. As James strode from the room, he already suspected that wasn't true. He'd spent 3 years carefully constructing walls around what remained of his heart. Now he'd just invited a woman and her child, aliens no less, to live in his private space. It was tactically unsound, emotionally reckless. Yet as the shuttle detached from the station an hour later, he found himself watching the sleeping infant from the corner of his eye. The child's tiny hand had escaped the carrier again and rested against her mother's chest, fingers splayed like a small blue starfish against the cream fabric. She's very well behaved, he found himself saying, the words feeling rusty in his mouth. Illyria glanced up from the datapad she'd been reviewing. She's always been calm, even during the evacuation of Alurus Prime. A shadow crossed her face. Children adapt quickly, sometimes more quickly than adults. James recognized the look of someone carrying grief. "Your husband?" He was a botanical researcher. When the Krellian forces bombarded our colony, he stayed behind to save his specimens, rare medicinal plants that could have helped millions. Her voice was steady, but her fingers gently stroked her daughter's head. "Lilu will never know her father, but his work saved thousands of refugees from a plague outbreak the following month." James nodded, understanding all too well the weight of survival when others had not. He turned his gaze to the viewport, watching as the stars streaked by. "My outpost is small," he said after a long silence, "converted from an old mining facility. It's not designed for families." "We don't need much space," Illyria replied. "Just somewhere clean to prepare meals and a corner to sleep." "There's a storage room adjacent to the galley. I can have a cot installed." "That would be perfect, thank you." The shuttle's navigation system chimed, indicating their approach to the outpost. As James moved to the cockpit to begin docking procedures, he caught a glimpse of Lilu's eyes opening again, tracking his movement with that same unnerving intensity. For a brief, disorienting moment, he felt as though those infant eyes could see straight through his armor, past the hardened exterior, to the wounded man beneath, the man who had once known how to smile, how to feel something beyond duty and regret. James shook off the sensation and focused on the controls. He was being ridiculous. The child was an infant, barely aware of her surroundings, and he was Captain James Holt, sole survivor of the dauntless massacre, a man who had buried his capacity for attachment alongside his crew. Yet as the shuttle docked with a gentle thud, he couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in his carefully ordered existence. James bolted upright in bed, his body drenched in cold sweat. The nightmare had been the same as always. The searing flash of Krellian energy weapons, the screams of his crew as the hull breached, the crushing silence that followed. His quarters felt suffocating despite the environmental controls maintaining perfect temperature. "Lights 30%, he commanded, his voice hoarse. The room illuminated dimly, revealing the sparse furnishings that reflected his military mindset, functional, orderly, devoid of personal touches. The chronometer read 0247 hours, another night of broken sleep. James swung his legs over the edge of the bed and pressed the heels of his palms against his eyes. The station's doctor had offered sleep aids months ago, but James had refused. The nightmares were punishment, a reminder of his failure to protect his people. A soft sound from the corridor outside his quarters made him tense. It wasn't the familiar hum of the station's systems or the occasional ping of the thermal regulators. It was singing, a gentle melody, barely audible through the door. Curiosity overrode caution. James pulled on a simple black t-shirt to accompany his sleep pants and padded barefoot to the door. It slid open with a whisper, revealing the dimly lit corridor beyond. The singing grew clearer, a lilting, otherworldly lullaby in a language his universal translator couldn't quite capture. He followed the sound to the galley, where a soft light spilled from the partially open door. Inside, Illyria paced slowly back and forth, Lilu cradled against her shoulder. The infant's eyes were wide open, those star-flecked indigo orbs seeming to glow in the low light as her mother sang. James remained in the doorway, unwilling to intrude on the private moment. But as if sensing his presence, Lilu's gaze shifted, locking onto him with that same unnerving intensity he'd noticed on the shuttle. The baby's tiny mouth curved into what could only be described as a smile. Illyria turned, startled. "Captain, I'm sorry if we disturbed you." "You didn't," James lied, leaning against the door frame in what he hoped was a casual pose. "I was already awake." Illyria studied him with those perceptive eyes. "Nightmares?" The directness of the question caught him off guard. Most people tiptoed around him, intimidated by his reputation or his perpetual scowl. "How did you know?" "Illyrians are somewhat empathic," she explained, adjusting Lilu in her arms. "Not mind readers, but we sense emotional distress. It's how mothers know what their babies need before they cry." James shifted uncomfortably. The idea that she could sense his emotional state made him feel exposed. "And what does she need now?" he asked, nodding toward Lilu. "Nothing, actually." She woke up and seemed drawn to this room. Illyria's brow furrowed slightly. It's strange. She's usually an excellent sleeper. As if to contradict her mother, Lilu squirmed and reached out toward James with tiny blue fingers. The gesture was so unexpected that James took an involuntary step backward. She wants you to hold her, Illyria said, sounding as surprised as James felt. I don't hold babies, he replied stiffly. Illyria's lips quirked in a small smile. Have you tried recently? Before James could formulate a response, Lilu let out a soft, insistent coo, still reaching for him with surprising determination for one so small. Just for a moment, Illyria suggested. She won't settle otherwise, and we could all use some sleep. Against his better judgment, James found himself stepping forward, arms awkwardly positioned as Illyria carefully transferred her daughter into his hold. The baby weighed almost nothing, a warm bundle that immediately snuggled against his chest. Support her head, Illyria instructed gently, guiding his hand to the proper position. The moment his fingers cradled Lilu's delicate head, something extraordinary happened. The persistent knot of tension that had lived between his shoulder blades for 3 years loosened. The residual images from his nightmare, the faces of his dead crew, faded like mist in sunlight. Lilu gazed up at him, those star-flecked eyes somehow both ancient and newborn, and let out a contented sigh before her eyelids finally drooped. That's remarkable, Illyria whispered, watching her daughter succumb to sleep in the arms of a man she'd met only hours ago. She's never taken to strangers like this. James couldn't explain the strange peace flowing through him. It was as if the child had somehow absorbed his nightmares, replacing them with a tranquility he hadn't experienced since before the Centaur incident. What's in her eyes? He asked quietly, mesmerized by the silver flecks that seemed to dance even as the baby slept. I've met Illyrians before, but I've never seen eyes like hers. A shadow passed over Illyria's face. Her father was half Stellari. They're a rare species with a connection to cosmic energies. The silver in her eyes is her heritage. She reached out to stroke her daughter's cheek. The Stellari believe that infants can see beyond physical reality, that they retain a connection to the universe that adults lose as they age. You believe that? James asked, surprised to find himself genuinely curious rather than dismissive. I believe my daughter is special, Illyria said simply, and I believe she sees something in you that others miss, Captain. Their eyes met over the sleeping infant, and for a brief moment, James felt an unfamiliar warmth spread through his chest. Illyria's proximity, the domestic intimacy of the moment, it stirred something he'd thought long dead. Lilu sighed in her sleep, breaking the moment. James carefully handed the baby back to her mother, his hands lingering perhaps a second longer than necessary. You should try to sleep now, Captain, Illyria said softly. I think you'll find the nightmares won't return tonight. James nodded, suddenly aware of his state of undress and the unusual vulnerability he'd just displayed. Good night, Miss Naveri. Illyria, please, she corrected with a gentle smile. And thank you for humoring her. As James returned to his quarters, he realized his body felt lighter, his mind clearer. For the first time in years, he slipped back into bed without dread. As sleep claimed him, his last conscious thought was of star-flecked eyes and the strange peace they had brought him. He didn't dream of the Dauntless that night. Instead, his sleeping mind filled with images of azure skies and silver stars, a lullaby in an alien tongue carrying him through the cosmos. Over the next 2 weeks, James developed a routine that would have been unthinkable before Illyria and Lilu arrived. Each night, when the nightmare threatened to surface, he would find himself drawn to the galley where, coincidentally, Illyria would be soothing a supposedly restless Lilu. They both knew the truth. Lilu slept perfectly well most nights. The midnight meetings had become a silent agreement, an unacknowledged necessity for them both. Tonight, James arrived to find Illyria already preparing 2 mugs of steaming liquid, Lilu contentedly playing with a small holographic toy in a makeshift playpen nearby. Stellari tea, Illyria explained, sliding a mug toward him. It helps with troubled minds. James accepted the drink, their fingers brushing briefly. The contact sent a warmth through him that had nothing to do with the tea. You're assuming my mind is troubled. Illyria's lips curved into a knowing smile. Captain, you've invented 7 different excuses this week to check on my daughter at precisely 0200 hours. Either you're troubled or you're developing a concerning obsession with my baby's sleep patterns. James felt a flush creep up his neck. I was just passing by. Of course, she agreed, eyes twinkling with amusement. Just as you were testing the environmental controls last night and checking for unusual vibrations in the ventilation system the night before. Despite himself, James felt the corner of his mouth twitch upward. You're mocking your superior officer. I'm observing that my employer seems to sleep better after spending time with my daughter. Illyria's voice softened. It's nothing to be ashamed of, James. It was the first time she'd used his given name, and the intimacy of it hung in the air between them. James stared into his tea, struggling with emotions he'd kept buried for so long. I was the only survivor, he said finally, the words escaping before he could stop them. The Dauntless was my ship, my responsibility. Illyria remained silent, giving him space to continue or retreat. I was inspecting the auxiliary power core when the Krellians attacked, he went on, surprising himself. The blast sealed me in. I could hear everything over the comms. The screams, the orders, the silence when it was over. It took rescue crews 3 days to cut through to me. Lilu made a soft cooing sound, drawing both their gazes. The infant was watching James with those remarkable eyes, as if she understood every word. Survivor's guilt, Illyria said gently. We have a similar concept in Illyrian culture. We call it the burden of the last light. James looked up. What does that mean? When a star goes supernova, its final burst of light travels outward for centuries after the star itself is gone. That light carries the memory of what was lost, but also the possibility of new beginnings. It illuminates worlds the star never knew. She reached across the table, her azure fingers resting lightly on his wrist. You are that light, James. The simple touch anchored him, kept him from drowning in memories. Your husband, he said. Do you feel it too? The guilt? Illyria's eyes clouded briefly. Every day. Talon stayed behind so others could escape. I sometimes wonder if I should have stayed with him. Then Lilu would be alone, James said, surprising himself with the fierceness in his voice. Yes, she agreed. And that's what keeps me moving forward. What keeps you moving forward, James? The question hung between them, unanswered, but not ignored. James found himself studying the delicate lines of her face, the way her silver hair caught the light, the gentle strength in her eyes. I'm not sure I was moving at all, he admitted, not until recently. Lilu chose that moment to let out a happy gurgle, reaching toward James with those tiny blue hands. Without hesitation this time, he rose and lifted her from the playpen, cradling her against his chest. The now familiar sense of peace washed over him as the baby patted his face with curious fingers. She likes your stubble, Illyria observed, watching them with an expression James couldn't quite decipher. Illyrian men don't grow facial hair. Should I shave? James asked, suddenly self-conscious. No, Illyria replied a little too quickly. A deeper blue flush spread across her cheeks. I mean, it's good for her to experience different textures. Sensory development and all that. James found himself smiling, a real smile that felt foreign on his face but somehow right. Is that the only reason? The blush deepened on Illyria's azure skin. Human directness is refreshing. That doesn't answer my question, James said, emboldened by the warmth in her eyes. Illyria stood and moved closer, close enough that he could detect the subtle floral scent that seemed to cling to her skin. I find your human features intriguing, Captain, the stubble included. The air between them charged with unspoken possibilities. Lilu, nestled between them, reached up to pat both their faces, as if bringing them together. She's a little matchmaker, James murmured, his voice rougher than he intended. She sees connections, Illyria whispered. It's the stellary in her. Their faces were inches apart now, the baby a warm presence between them. James felt something crack inside him, the final barrier he'd built around his heart giving way. Illyria, he began, not entirely sure what he was about to say. The station's communication system blared to life, shattering the moment. Incoming transmission from Earth Command, Priority Alpha, Captain Holt to communications immediately. James closed his eyes briefly, frustration warring with duty. I have to take this. Illyria nodded, carefully taking Lilu from his arms. Of course. As James turned to leave, Illyria caught his hand. We'll be here when you're done, she said softly. Some conversations are worth continuing. The promise in her words followed him as he strode toward the communications room, his mind divided between duty and the unexpected future that suddenly seemed possible. James strode into the communications room, his mind still lingering on the moment with Illyria that had been so abruptly interrupted. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the stern face of Admiral Parker, his former commanding officer. Captain Holt, Parker said without preamble, we've detected a Krellian scout vessel on the edge of your sector. Intelligence suggests it's gathering data on remote outposts. James felt his blood run cold. Krellians? Are you certain? Positive. Their energy signature is unmistakable. Parker's expression hardened. This is the first confirmed Krellian activity since the Centauri incident. We need to know what they're planning. My outpost isn't equipped for combat, Admiral. I have minimal defensive capabilities and no backup. We're dispatching the UES Valiant to your position, but they're 3 days out. Parker leaned closer to the screen. Until then, you're to maintain full alert status and gather any intelligence possible. If they approach, engage only if necessary to protect the outpost. Otherwise, stay dark and observe. Understood, sir. James's mind was already calculating scenarios, contingencies, and the safety of 2 civilians who had unexpectedly become his highest priority. One more thing, Holt. Parker's voice softened slightly. I know what this means for you. If you need to recuse yourself. That won't be necessary, Admiral, James interrupted, his jaw tight. I'll handle it. After the transmission ended, James stood motionless, memories threatening to overwhelm him. The Krellians, reptilian warriors with an expansionist ideology that viewed other species as resources to be harvested or obstacles to be eliminated. They had destroyed the Dauntless without warning or mercy, and now they were near his outpost, near Illyria and Lilu. James activated the station's alert protocols, then made his way back to the galley. He found Illyria still there, gently rocking a now sleeping Lilu. What's happened? She asked immediately, reading his expression. Krellian scout ship detected in the sector, he said, keeping his voice low. I need to implement security protocols. Illyria's face paled to a lighter shade of blue. Krellians? Here, her arms tightened protectively around Lilu. They destroyed the Illurian colony where Talon and I lived. They're the reason Lilu will never know her father. The shared enemy created a new bond between them, a mutual understanding that needed no words. James moved closer and placing a hand on her shoulder. I won't let anything happen to either of you, he promised, the fierce protectiveness in his voice surprising even himself. Illyria looked up at him, her indigo eyes glistening with unshed tears. I know you won't. That's who you are, James. It's what Lilu saw in you from the beginning. Without thinking, James leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but quickly deepened as Illyria responded with equal fervor. Her lips were softer than he'd imagined, with a subtle sweetness that reminded him of summer berries. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Lilu stirred between them but didn't wake. I've wanted to do that since you stepped off the shuttle, James admitted, his voice rough with emotion. Illyria's azure skin flushed a deeper blue. I've wanted you to since I first saw you scowling at Administrator Moran. Despite the gravity of the situation, James found himself smiling. I don't scowl that much anymore. No, she agreed, reaching up to trace the lines of his face. You don't. The station's alert system chimed, breaking the moment. Proximity alert. Unidentified vessel approaching outer sensor range. James straightened, military training taking over. Take Lilu to your quarters. The storage room adjacent to the galley has a hidden emergency shelter. If you hear the evacuation alarm, take her there immediately. Illyria nodded, her expression resolute. What will you do? My job, he said simply. Protect what's mine. The possessive declaration hung in the air between them, neither acknowledging the shift it represented. James leaned down to place a gentle kiss on Lilu's head, then captured Illyria's lips once more in a kiss that held both promise and farewell. "Be careful," she whispered against his mouth. "Always am," he replied with a confidence he didn't entirely feel. As Illyria disappeared down the corridor with Lilu, James made his way to the command center. The outpost's defensive systems were limited, but not negligible. He had a few tricks that might keep a scout ship at bay. The main screen showed the approaching vessel, sleek, predatory, unmistakably Krellian in design. James activated the outpost's stealth protocols, reducing power to non-essential systems and engaging the experimental cloaking technology that had been installed during the last refit. "Let's see how good their sensors really are," he muttered, initiating a series of false energy signatures designed to confuse enemy tracking systems. As he worked, James realized something had fundamentally changed within him. 3 years of existing in a fog of guilt and grief had been burned away by the fierce need to protect the 2 blue-skinned aliens who had somehow become his world. The Krellian ship slowed as it approached the outpost's outer sensor range, clearly detecting the conflicting signals James was broadcasting. It held position, scanning. James watched, barely breathing, as minutes stretched into an hour. Finally, the ship altered course, moving away from the outpost toward a nearby asteroid field. He allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction. The first round had gone to him, but he knew the Krellians wouldn't be fooled for long. This was just the beginning. As if confirming his thoughts, the communication system chimed with an encrypted message from Earth Command. "Valiant delayed. Estimate arrival now 5 days. Maintain vigilance." James closed his eyes briefly. 5 days. He needed to keep Illyria and Lilu safe for 5 more days against an enemy that had once destroyed an entire battlecruiser in minutes. When he opened his eyes, his reflection in the darkened view screen showed something he hadn't seen in years. The determined face of a man with something to fight for, something to live for. "They won't take this from me," he promised his reflection. "Not this time." James had just finished reinforcing the outpost's security protocols when the communication system chimed with an unexpected signal. "Incoming transmission, unknown origin, Krellian encryption detected." His hand hovered over the control panel. This could be a trap, a way for the Krellians to trace the outpost's exact position or implant malicious code into the systems. But it could also be valuable intelligence. "Run triple-layer isolation protocols," he ordered the computer. "Route to secondary terminal only." The message appeared on a separate screen, text only. "Captain Holt, I am scientist, 3rd rank Vexer. Require immediate asylum. Have critical information about scout mission. They hunt stellary hybrids. Will dock at maintenance airlock in 20 minutes. Come alone or I self-terminate." James's blood ran cold. Stellary hybrids. Like Lilu. He grabbed his sidearm and headed for Illyria's quarters, his mind racing. This could be an elaborate trap, but the mention of stellari hybrids was too specific to ignore. Illyria opened the door before he could knock, as if she'd sensed his approach. "What's wrong?" "I received a transmission from a Krellian scientist requesting asylum. Claims they're hunting stellari hybrids." He watched her face pale. "You need to take Lilu to the emergency shelter now." "James, if they're specifically hunting stellari..." "I know," he cut her off, his voice tight. "That's why I need you both hidden while I deal with this. I can't focus if I'm worried about you." Illyria stepped closer, placing her hand on his chest. "Be careful. Krellians are known for deception." "Trust me," he said, covering her hand with his own. "I know what they're capable of." Their eyes met, volumes of unspoken emotion passing between them. Then, with a decisive movement, Illyria pulled him down for a fierce kiss that left him momentarily stunned. "That's for luck," she whispered against his lips. "Human tradition, yes?" Despite everything, James felt a smile tug at his mouth. Something like that. He watched as Illyria gathered a sleeping Lilu in a small bag of essentials, then escorted them to the hidden shelter adjacent to the galley. After securing them inside, he made his way to the maintenance airlock, checking his weapon and activating his tactical armor. The airlock's external sensors showed a small Krellian escape pod approaching. James positioned himself with clear lines of fire and waited, tension coiling in every muscle. The pod docked with a metallic clank. After cycling through decontamination protocols, the inner door slid open to reveal a Krellian, smaller than most, with scales that had a grayish tint rather than the typical emerald green. The alien wore what appeared to be civilian clothes rather than military armor. "Captain Holt," the Krellian said, voice raspy but understandable through the translator. "I am Vexer. Thank you for not shooting me immediately." James kept his weapon trained on the visitor. "Give me one reason why I shouldn't. Because in approximately 18 hours, that scout ship will deploy a specialized hunting party to this outpost. They detected trace stellari energy signatures during their scan." Vexer's vertical pupils dilated. "They believe you are harboring a stellari hybrid. They are correct, are they not?" James's finger tightened on the trigger. "Why would you betray your own kind?" "My kind?" Vexer gave a sound like bitter laughter. "The military caste considers scientists like me barely above servants. I've spent my career developing technologies to help people, only to watch the military pervert them into weapons." The Krellian scales rippled in what James recognized as their version of disgust. "When I discovered they were using my scanning technology to hunt stellari hybrids, children, Captain, I could no longer remain silent." "What do they want with stellari hybrids?" James demanded. "Their energy manipulation abilities. The military believes they can be harvested and weaponized." Vexer's voice dropped. "No test subject has survived the process." James felt sick. "And I'm supposed to trust you because I sabotaged their primary weapons systems before escaping. It will buy you perhaps 6 hours before they repair them." Vexer held out a data crystal. "This contains their tactical plans, security codes, and the location of their fleet. I only ask for asylum in return." Before James could respond, the station's alarm blared. "Perimeter breach. Unknown entities detected in Sector 4. "Impossible," Vexer hissed. "They couldn't have launched an assault team yet." "Unless they suspected you were defecting," James said grimly, activating his comm. "Computer, location of intruders. 3 entities moving through maintenance tunnels toward Central Hub." James made a split-second decision. "If you're telling the truth, help me protect this outpost. If not," he raised his weapon meaningfully. Vexor nodded. "I will help you, Captain." The hunting party consists of 3 elite warriors. They will be wearing stealth armor and carrying neural disruptors designed to incapacitate without killing. They want the child alive. "Follow me," James ordered, leading the way to the armory. "We need to set up defensive positions." As they moved through the corridors, James's mind was on Illyria and Lilu in the shelter. He had to keep the Krellians from finding them, had to buy time until the Valiant arrived. "Captain," Vexer said quietly as they entered the armory, "you should know that stellari hybrids are extremely rare and valuable. My people have been hunting them for decades. If there is indeed one on this station, you face more danger than you realize." James selected a pulse rifle and tossed a non-lethal stun weapon to Vexer. "Her name is Lilu," he said, surprising himself with the admission. "She's 7 months old. Her father was half stellari, her mother Illyrian, and they are under my protection." Vexer studied him with those alien eyes. "You care for them. They are not just your charges." "They're my family," James said, the truth of it settling into his bones. "And I'll die before I let anyone take them from me." The Krellian scientist was silent for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Then we share a purpose, Captain. My people have much to answer for. Perhaps this is where it begins." The station sensors chimed again. "Intruders approaching residential section." James's heart froze. They were heading straight for Illyria's quarters. "They can detect stellari energy residue," Vexer explained. "If the child spent significant time in those quarters." James was already moving, Vexer following close behind. "We need to draw them away from the residential section," he said, formulating a plan. "Vexer, can you create a false stellari energy signature?" "With the right equipment, yes," the scientist replied. "Then let's give these hunters something to chase," James said grimly, "while I remind them why humans are the most dangerous prey of all." "The lab module," James whispered as they crouched in a maintenance junction. "We can use the spectrometer there to generate a false stellari energy signature." Vexor nodded, his scaled fingers already working on a small device he'd taken from the armory. "I can modify this scanner to amplify the signature once we create it. The hunters will be drawn to the strongest source." They moved silently through the station's service corridors, using James's intimate knowledge of the outpost to avoid detection. The station's computer fed tactical updates to James's wrist device, tracking the Krellian hunters' movements. "They've split up," James noted grimly. "Two still in the residential section, but one's heading toward the galley." Vexor's eyes widened. They must have detected residual energy from the child. Even brief exposure leaves traces. James felt ice in his veins. The shelter where Illyria and Lilu hid was adjacent to the galley. Change of plans. "You get to the lab and set up the false signature. I'm going to intercept the hunter near the galley." "Alone?" "These are elite warriors, Captain. They dash." "They're hunting my family," James cut him off, his voice deadly calm. "That's their mistake." Without waiting for a response, James slipped away, moving through the corridors with the silent precision that had once made him the youngest special operations commander in Earth's fleet. He disabled his comm unit. The Krellians might be monitoring communications, and relied on instinct and training. As he approached the galley, James slowed his breathing and activated the tactical display in his armor's visor. The hunter's heat signature appeared at the far end of the corridor, a reptilian form moving with predatory grace, scanning methodically for traces of stellari energy. James assessed his options. The hunter was equipped with advanced stealth armor and likely had superior strength and reflexes. A direct confrontation would be risky, but James had something the Krellian couldn't match: the desperate, primal need to protect what was his. He waited until the hunter passed beneath a ventilation duct, then dropped silently behind him. The Krellian sensed the movement a split second too late. James drove his combat knife into the gap between the hunter's armor plates at the neck, targeting the neural cluster that Vexor had identified as a vulnerability. The hunter whirled with shocking speed, throwing James against the wall with enough force to crack the reinforced plating. Pain exploded across James's back, but adrenaline kept him moving. He ducked under a vicious swipe of the Krellian's clawed gauntlet and drove his shoulder into the alien's midsection. They crashed into the galley, knocking over tables and equipment. The Krellian was stronger, but James was fighting with the focused fury of a man protecting everything he cared about. Each blow he landed was calculated, targeting weak points in the alien's armor. The hunter hissed something in the guttural Krellian language and activated a neural disruptor, a rod-like weapon that crackled with energy. One touch would paralyze James instantly. "You cannot win, human." The translator in James's armor rendered the hunter's words. "Give us the hybrid child and you may live." "Come and take her," James growled, feigning left before diving right, seizing a heavy metal pot from the counter and smashing it into the Krellian's face with all his strength. The hunter staggered, momentarily disoriented. James pressed his advantage, delivering a series of brutal strikes to the already damaged neck armor. When the Krellian swung the neural disruptor in a wide arc, James caught the arm and used the alien's momentum to drive the weapon into its own chest. The hunter convulsed as the disruptor's energy coursed through its body, then collapsed in a heap of twitching limbs and deactivated armor. James stood over the fallen Krellian, chest heaving, blood trickling from a cut above his eye. The hidden door to the shelter was just meters away, still undiscovered. Illyria and Lilu were safe, for now. A slow clapping sound from the doorway made him spin, weapon raised. Vexor stood there, eyes wide with what James recognized as the Krellian equivalent of awe. "Remarkable," the scientist said. "Our military teaches that humans are physically inferior, relying only on their technology. They are profoundly mistaken." "The false signature," James demanded, wiping blood from his face. "Active. The other two hunters are converging on the lab as we speak, where a very convincing trap awaits them." Vexor approached cautiously, examining the fallen hunter. "You defeated Krelvor, one of our most decorated warriors, in hand-to-hand combat. This is unprecedented." "He threatened my family," James said simply, as if that explained everything. And perhaps it did, because Vexor nodded slowly. "The concept of fighting for family is not unknown among my people, but it is discouraged. The collective is valued above individual bonds. He gestured to the unconscious hunter. Yet I have never seen one of our warriors defeated by a single opponent of any species. Humanity has a long history of doing the impossible when someone we love is in danger, James said, already moving toward the shelter. Help me secure this one before the others realize they've been tricked. After binding the hunter with reinforced restraints, James approached the hidden door. Illyria, it's me. It's safe to come out. The door slid open to reveal Illyria, holding Lilu protectively against her chest, a makeshift weapon clutched in her free hand. When she saw James, bloodied but alive, she let out a sob of relief and rushed into his arms. I heard the fighting, she whispered against his neck. I was so afraid. James held them both, his arms encircling the two beings who had become his world. Lilu reached up with tiny fingers to touch his face, her star-flecked eyes wide and somehow understanding. I would never let them take you, he promised, pressing his forehead to Illyria's. Either of you. Vexor watched the reunion with an expression that might have been wistfulness on a human face. Captain, we should move quickly. My trap will not hold the others indefinitely. James nodded, reluctantly releasing Illyria, but keeping her hand firmly in his. We need to get to the command center. I can lock down the entire station from there. As they moved through the corridors, Illyria kept Lilu close, but her eyes never left James's face. You're injured, she said softly. It's nothing, he assured her, though his body ached from the fight. It's not nothing, she insisted. You fought for us. You could have died. James stopped, turning to face her fully. Illyria, before you and Lilu arrived, I was just existing, going through the motions. You both gave me something to live for again. He cupped her face with his free hand. I love you. Both of you. I should have said it sooner. The words, once unthinkable to him, now felt like the most natural truth in the universe. Illyria's eyes glistened with tears as she leaned into his touch. I love you too, she whispered. We both do. Lilu cooed in agreement, reaching for James again. The moment was perfect, suspended in time, until the station's alarm blared once more. Alert! Krellian vessel approaching. Weapons systems active. The scout ship, Vexor hissed. They must have repaired their systems faster than I anticipated. James's expression hardened as he looked from Illyria and Lilu to the Krellian scientist who had risked everything to help them. Then it's time we show them what happens when they threaten the wrong family. The command center's main screen displayed the approaching Krellian scout ship, its weapon systems glowing with deadly energy. They're preparing to fire, James announced, his fingers flying over the control panels. Vexor, I need everything you know about their targeting systems. The Krellian scientist moved to an adjacent console. Their primary weapons lock onto thermal signatures. If we could create multiple false heat sources. Already on it, James replied, activating the outpost's external maintenance drones. But that's just a distraction. What I really need is access to their command protocols. Vexor's eyes widened. You want to hack a Krellian military vessel? Impossible. Their encryption is based on your research, James finished for him, a dangerous smile playing at his lips. And you're going to help me turn it against them. As they worked frantically to implement James's audacious plan, Illyria settled Lilu in a secure corner of the command center, then joined them. What can I do? James glanced up, momentarily struck by her determination. Monitor communications. If Earth Command responds to our distress signal, I need to know immediately. The station shuddered as the first Krellian blast struck its shields. Shields at 80%, the computer announced dispassionately. Almost there, Vexor muttered, his clawed fingers moving with surprising dexterity. Captain, this plan of yours, it's either brilliant or suicidal. That's humanity for you, James replied, not looking up from his work. We specialize in the impossible. Another blast rocked the station. Shields at 65%. Illyria's console suddenly lit up. James! Incoming transmission. It's Earth Command. The view screen split to show Admiral Parker's stern face. Holt, we've detected Krellian weapons fire at your position. The Valiant has increased to emergency speed. ETA 20 minutes. We might not have 20 minutes, Admiral, James responded, still working. But I have a plan that might just solve our Krellian problem permanently. Parker's eyebrows rose. Explain. No time, sir. But I have a Krellian defector with critical intelligence about their operations. Request permission to take whatever measures necessary to protect this outpost. The Admiral studied him for a moment. Granted, Captain. And Holt, good to see that fire back in your eyes. As the transmission ended, James turned to Vexor. Ready? The scientist nodded. The back door is established. Their systems are vulnerable. James's fingers danced across the console, implementing the final phase of his plan. Activating now. On the view screen, the Krellian ship's weapons suddenly powered down. A moment later, its engines flared in an erratic pattern. What did you do? Illyria asked, amazed. I used Vexor's access codes to upload a modified version of their own targeting software, James explained, a satisfied gleam in his eye. Their weapons now recognize their own ship as the primary target. If they try to fire again, they'll each attack themselves. Vexor made a sound between a hiss and a laugh. Elegant, brutal, but elegant. The Krellian ship hung motionless in space, clearly confused by the sudden malfunction of their systems. Then abruptly, it began to retreat. They're running, Illyria breathed. Not for long, James said grimly. Look. The view screen showed a massive vessel emerging from hyperspace, the UES Valiant, Earth's newest battle cruiser, its imposing silhouette bristling with weapons. The cavalry has arrived, James murmured, allowing himself to relax slightly. Within minutes, the Valiant had the Krellian scout ship captured in a tractor beam. Admiral Parker's face reappeared on the screen. Well done, Holt. We'll take it from here. The Krellian vessel is secured, and we're dispatching a team to collect your defector and prisoners. Thank you, Admiral, James replied. There's something else you should know. The Krellians have been hunting stellary hybrids for weapons research. This information could change our understanding of their recent expansions. Parker's expression darkened. I see. We'll need detailed debriefings from all of you. And Holt, the Valiant needs a new first officer, someone with your experience and creative problem-solving skills. James felt Illyria stiffen beside him. He reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. I'm honored, Admiral, but I have conditions. Conditions? Parker's eyebrows rose again. Yes, sir. I'll accept the position only if my family can accompany me. He glanced at Illyria and Lilu. I've recently discovered that some things are worth fighting for, and worth changing for. The Admiral's stern expression softened almost imperceptibly. Family? Illyria Navari and her daughter, Lilu. Illyria is an exceptional chef with experience on luxury liners. The Valiant's crew would benefit from her skills. And James took a deep breath. I intend to make them officially my family as soon as possible. Parker studied the unusual trio, the battle-hardened human captain, the elegant azure-skinned Illyrian, and the infant with star-flecked eyes who was reaching for James again. After a moment, he nodded. The Valiant could use a proper chef instead of those replicator jockeys. And it might be time for Earth Command to reconsider some of its policies regarding interspecies families. Report to the Valiant in 24 hours, Captain. With that, the transmission ended. Vexor cleared his throat. It seems I will be going with the Earth forces as well. My knowledge of Krellian military operations will be valuable to them. Will you be all right? Illyria asked him. The scientist's scales rippled in what they now recognized as his version of a shrug. I chose my path when I defected, but perhaps my research can finally be used to help rather than harm. He looked at Lilu. She deserves to grow up in a universe where she is not hunted for what makes her special. After Vexor left to prepare for the arrival of Earth forces, James and Illyria found themselves alone in the command center, Lilu contentedly playing with a holographic toy between them. Did you mean what you said? Illyria asked softly. About making us your family officially? James turned to her, taking both her hands in his. I've never meant anything more. I spent 3 years buried in grief and guilt, convinced I'd never feel anything again. Then you and Lilu walked into my life and everything changed. He brushed a strand of silver hair from her face. I love you, Illyria. I want to build a life with you, with both of you. Illyria's eyes shimmered with emotion. In Illyrian culture, we believe that souls recognize each other across lifetimes. Perhaps that's why Lilu knew you immediately. She recognized the soul of her father. James felt his throat tighten. I would be honored to be her father, to be your partner, your mate, your husband, whatever term means forever to you. Forever sounds perfect, Illyria whispered, leaning in to kiss him with a tenderness that quickly deepened into passion. Later that night, after the Earth forces had secured the outpost and collected the Krellian prisoners, James lay in his quarters with Illyria curled against him, her azure skin glowing softly in the dim light. Their lovemaking had been both tender and fierce, a celebration of life and the future they would build together. Lilu slept peacefully in a makeshift crib nearby, her tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. As James watched his new family, he realized that the star-flecked eyes of an alien child had accomplished what years of therapy and reassignments could not. They had awakened his heart, reminded him how to love, how to hope. Tomorrow they would board the Valiant and begin their new life among the stars. James would wear his uniform with pride again, not as a mask to hide behind, but as a symbol of the strength he had found in loving and being loved. As sleep claimed him, James felt Illyria's hand rest over his heart and Lilu's peaceful presence in his mind. For the first time since the Dauntless, his dreams were filled not with fire and death, but with the infinite possibilities of the universe, and the family who would explore it with him.